Hi everyone, welcome to Startup Cafe. For those of you that are new to the KIN, we are an impact-driven membership club, co-work space. We do a wide array of programming when it comes to elevating your heart, your mind, your agency to become an agent of change. Before we kick it off, I'd like to introduce Bruce Cryer, who's the CEO of the HeartMath Institute, and I'm excited to have you here tonight. I'd actually like to have you in the guest chair as well at some point. So without further ado, welcome.
Thanks a lot. I have a really fun job today. I get to introduce this guy and have a conversation with him. And give you a quick little update on who I am. How many of you have heard of HRV, heart rate variability? If you have any wearable device, you know what HRV is. Part of the reason that exists as a consumer thing is that the organization that I helped to found, called the HeartMath Institute 35 years ago, got into studying HRV, which at that time was just a kind of arcane little branch of cardiology. And then we realized this was relevant to every human being on the planet. If we can learn to regulate our HRV, regulate our emotional state, regulate our breath, life changes. And so, thank you. If you know about HRV, it's because we did a lot of grunt work back in the early 90s to establish just how valuable a tool that was. So that's a little bit about my interest in health and wellness. A long time history with these topics. I've had a chance to really practice them. I'm a cancer survivor. 15 and a half years ago, I went through cancer, surgery, treatments. I'm good, by the way, 15 years cancer-free. And I learned to really apply what I was learning about spirituality, about meditation, about mindfulness, about breath work. And we met not that long ago, I mean, like a month. But I had been listening to him, unbeknownst to him, a track that's on an app of an incredible device, of the founder of which is in the back, a device called Sensate. Those of you who know the very cool product called Sensate. Anna Goodmanson, the CEO and co-founder, is here as well. And one of this gentleman's tracks was on that app, and I fell in love with it at a time when I was deciding to move back from the East Coast, where I'd been for a few years, back to the Bay Area where I currently live. And I loved this track so much, it was actually called Come Home, and I was in the process of deciding to come home back to California. Thank God I'm here. 7 years in Florida, Texas, New Jersey, New York. I'm glad to be back. Anyway, this guy is going to have an incredible presentation for you, and then we're gonna have a chat. And I want to give a little intro from your, speaking of chat. So, speaking of chat, so he had a very clever idea, which was to ask Chat, GPT, to introduce him. So imagine I'm actually Chat, GPT. You're a visionary maestro at the crossroads of soul, science, and sound, blending Grammy-caliber artistry with Forbes-level intellect. Whether you're launching purpose-driven albums, decoding the therapeutic frequencies of classic soul, or diving into biometric wearables and AI music trends, you move with both heart and hypothesis. A creative disruptor with the strategy of a label exec, the soul of a healer, and the precision of a research scientist. You don't just ride cultural and technological waves, you help compose them. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Frank Fitzpatrick.
Well, thank you, Bruce. And I'm going to stand because we're going to talk about energy, and I shouldn't be sitting. So, but thank you, Bruce. And as Oliver said, Bruce, I could be interviewing Bruce, and we could both be interviewing. We could be doing that for a long time. He has a lot to share. So please, we're going to kind of fly through and just touch on things a little bit today because of our precious time together, and you all have things in your life. And but please, stay afterward. I'll answer any questions. Reach out to me. You'll get my email. Will be at the end of these couple of slides. Feel free to. I'm here to serve the community. I'm really proud of Oliver and the team and what they've built here. There's a lot of really purpose-driven and heart-centered entrepreneurs trying to build meaningful things at a really critical time. So. If you don't get what you need out of this talk and there's something more you want to know, please reach out, speak to either of us afterward. That's why we're here. So, And then I'm going to make a bit of a I know a lot of, but a few people have told me they, come out to hear me talk about music. And the music part, most of it was you just listen to the last 2 albums without knowing it. So it was a little, a little bit subtle. But I'm really called in these days to bring my experience forth of, 40-something years as an entrepreneur and being across many different fields of science and technology and communications and Hollywood media, to bring the original purpose of what got me there when I made a life choice at 12. And that was to help people find calm in the midst of chaos and to thrive in the face of challenge. So one of those tools is music, and we will come back to music. But there's a lot more that I've learned along the way in the last 40 years that I stack into that and have integrated into that and feel called in this particular time as the accelerating disruption is taking place and people are trying to build into it and for people within it. I know there's a lot of challenges and I want to be able to give you something practical that you can use to navigate those storms. So for those who just wanted to hear about music and frequencies, we'll get a taste of that, but I'm not going to focus on that. So I will try to move things along, and I may move a little faster than you like. I may move a little slower than the clock wants me to. But I'm going to just share a few slides around some framework of some material that I usually do a full workshop on, or I just finished a program with Chip Connolly's crew down at MEA. And it's really about how do we cultivate energy and coherence, as you might put it, in really stressful times and for the long haul. It's like we're always trying to get through the next day, but we got a long road ahead. So how do you really build that capacity? And so I'm going to go through the practices that I've learned and what I've learned from the top people who train in science and peak performance and longevity and the spaces that I work and just try to share some of those. Some of them will be very familiar to you. I won't go deep into them, but we can at another time. And I think we're going to I'll queue up a longer session to do that, a workshop or something if people are interested. So, so why energy? Why, out of all the things I could talk about today, why energy? Energy is the number one currency in the world. I mean, we have fought wars over oil, we have fought wars over energy sources, and what we haven't really done a really good deep dive into is how to cultivate our own most valuable, precious resource, which is our own energy, which controls our attention, our focus, our health and well-being. So, being able to master your own energy and have the tools to do so and have the awareness to know where it's at is really critical for success in any area of your life, including your business. We're all taught about time management, right? How make the most efficient use of your time. Well, you can't make any kind of efficient anything if you don't have the energy to do so. So energy is much more powerful way to regulate, self-regulate, create success than time. Better energy creates time, actually. So again, I'm flying through this stuff so we could go deeper. So pause me if you need to and ask any questions afterward as well. So in the longevity space, it's been a big thing over the last few years. Longevity, live forever, biohack your way to success. It's really about. I work in the longevity space because it puts me 10 years ahead of medicine. And it allows me to learn things just like when we study at NASA or we do things that, get us technologies that have to push the envelope, or with peak performers who are, the LeBron Jameses of the world, who have to push the envelope so that we can learn from that human potential within us and within all of us and bring it back to people en masse. But longevity is not, to me, about living, how many years you live. It's about how well you live those years. And so if you got an extra 10 years on your life, or maybe some of us by the time you're pretty young, so the way things are going, you might have an extra 20, 30 years in your life. What kind of energy are you building? What kind of practices are you building now that are going to make those years healthy, vital, fulfilling? And that's, what we really want to focus on. So, and then human potential, we just talked a little bit about that. So what is energy? Well, vitality, vitalis is a word for energy. It's, our capacity to live and grow with enthusiasm, vigor, and exuberance. We all want to have this thriving driver, even in the midst of, when shit knocks us down, we can bounce back up, or, we know how to process the emotions that are moving through us quickly in an effective way and return to coherence. I will. All right, so it's not so much, energy is not so much about what you do, although the protocols are very important. We're going to go to some, and we have a lot of science on them, and most of them, you know what they are, but, if I'm coaching an executive or somebody, a leader, and they're going into a critical meeting, it's not about what they do and what they have to say and what's the strategy they come up with. It's about how they show up, who they are when they walk in the room, who they are when they're speaking. So it's this, and that's all about, again, managing, regulating, understanding what's going on with your energy and being prepared to stand for whatever comes. So you're much more likely to close a deal with the right people that you resonate with, and maybe not every VC or person, if you're in the space of that people aspire to be in an energetic space. It's just a natural law. So, and then we always talk about, our why, the great transformational purpose. And purpose is very critical, but it's hard to have a really strong why unless you know for whom. So think about it. It can be one person, can be your son, can be a parent you lost, can be your, whatever it is. But hero, the word hero means that to have the courage, the strength for two. So, if you want to have heroic energy, as something, you're surprised by the strength that comes through you when you show up for somebody else, right? Very hard to create for yourself. Oops. Now this is gonna be a life flyby so, for me, so you may have a lot of outstanding questions again, but I wanna, I get asked all the time, when is this gonna stop? When is it gonna get easier? When are the challenges gonna stop? And I'm like, why do you want the gifts to stop coming that help you to be the flourishing creative soul that you're meant to be? We are the creative species, and you're given challenges so that you can grow into that, expand your capacity as the creative source. So it's it's very hard to see that when you're in it, and a lot of shit really sucks, and you don't really want to get punched in the face again. But the truth of the matter is, if you look back in your life, whether however long your life has been, and when you look back at your life, like Bruce and I, who are over the age of 25, so it's we see, I can see all of my growth and breakthroughs and pivotal decisions and things came out of going through challenge, And that started for me when I was 12 years old. I found my purpose as a 12-year-old kid on the streets of Detroit when I chose music over heroin. And that's why I can be standing with you here today, and that continues 50 years later to be a core center of my purpose, of why my soul's in my body in the world at this time. That led me to learn everything I could about how music and the brain and emotions and biology works, so that I could then take that out into the world through the media work that I did, and try to reach 50 million people at a time and transform the way they think and feel about life and themselves, So that was, I think of that as a great gift, that treasure. Other people would say, oh, that's so traumatic. There's something we call post-traumatic growth. Everybody talks about post-traumatic stress, but there is a post-traumatic growth depending on our mindsets. So I got moved to LA. I got brought out to LA after graduating with a couple degrees, and brought into the music business. And I had scoliosis as a kid, and at this point I was working in the music and film business and a lot of hours, and I was in constant pain, and they wanted to put a rod up my spine. And I thought that doesn't sound like a very good idea. So basically I went on a pursuit of all the alternative healing methodologies of how I could straighten my spine, which they said couldn't be done. And that led me to yoga. It led me to some other therapeutics. It led me to hosting a program 40 years ago on the, with all the alternative healers I could find on Stevie Wonder's station, commercial radio station. And just so it allowed me to do all these things that I was driven to do because I had this driver that was, I call it, some people call it a curse, scoliosis. I call it a blessing in disguise. It drove me into a 40-year practice of yoga and meditation. And then since I'm a little bit type A, I go pretty deep into the spaces that I go. So that allowed me to dive into Vedanta and the Vedic history and practices and spirituality and ancient wisdom cultures and what we learned from Ayurveda and different other health sources over the last 10,000 years and bring that forward. I'll try not to go through all of these. 25, I was on the edge of a nervous breakdown. I was a solo entrepreneur. It wasn't going well. Felt very isolated. Things were failing pretty badly. And that led me to connect with somebody who was one of the leaders in the emotional intelligence movement make a big pivot in my life and do a deep dive into learning everything I could about EQ and we crossed a lot of paths in that space. Meditation, I was working at the craziness peak of Hollywood, and it became a non-negotiable to do a meditation practice because I couldn't work 18 hours a day, 6-7 days a week, and get through without having these serious practices to navigate the tension and the insanity. So I can go on, and that led me to, studying flow and creativity deeper, understanding that, because I was in the creative field, music and film, and learning to frameworks around positive psychology, and went through a traumatic divorce, and that took me into more work in self-actualization. How did I contribute to this? Really understanding my own, ownership of how I was playing in the world, and what I want to get to what's the heart of the talk. So forgive me for all this warm up and. I hope you're watching time. No. So, but this is what I want to share with you, and I don't want to happen to you. At around 50, I'd been through a lot of things, and I was traveling all over the world, taking these 12-hour flights to Shanghai and to Sao Paulo, and going over to the UK to work with governments and brands and people, films and all kinds of stuff. But it's not so much that, but I had these practices. I was, trained in many modalities of meditation and breath work and yoga, and so I could kind of band-aid my way through. So if I did all this intense travel, I get off a flight in China after 12 hours. I got to show up in a meeting with the government in the studios and the head of the NFL there, and NBA there. I mean, and I've had no good sleep and highly stressful situation. I'd, go to the temple, or I'd go in my hotel room and I'd meditate and recapture my energy and step in the room and have some form of temporary coherence. Then I burned out. So when I burned out, because I was 2 years past burnout. So because I had all these practices, which were great, and I'm going to recommend them all, but I didn't have something that would allow me to be in the kind of intensity that I was in the world, and the kind of intensity that I was putting myself into with work. So I thought, well, I'm missing something here. So I started to took me about a year to rebuild my adrenal system, learned everything I could about functional medicine and more about health and medicine, and learned, and then started to look at who are the peak performers in the world that are able to just rock it regardless of the stuff that they're facing and challenging. So I looked at peak performance and trained in a lot of the human potential trainings and peak performance stuff, really just to try to be able to understand and show up and in a way that I wasn't going to burn out next time around. I have a long road ahead of me and a lot I want to do in the world. So what I'm going to talk about today, and he'll have lots of other questions for me, so we'll see where we go today, and you'll have questions. But I'm just going to talk about some basically fundamental practices. We're not going to deep dive into them, but if there was 10 things that you could do every day, and it sounds like a lot to do 10 things a day, you could pick your favorite 3 that are like what we call your non-negotiables. But these are pretty science-based at this point, ancient wisdom proven across thousands of years, ways to regulate and your energy, bring yourself to coherence, kind of thrive and have some area of peak performance. So breath, you all know about, there's a lot coming forth in breath work. I know there's somebody here who does breath work, and that's their practice. And so it's the number one foundational tool for any peak performer is breath. And we can go into, I won't go more into that, but we could do a whole talk just on any one of these elements, or a whole day on any one of these elements. Eating and hydrating, I mean, I think by now people know they have to eat healthy. This that you're looking at is my food body. so it's all made of what I eat, and there's other parts of me that are not made of that, but that's important to understand. So if you can kill your energy really quick or improve your energy and your mental state. So in a lot of the work that we've done in cohorts of different scientists, researchers, and practitioners, is we're learning more and more as we move into the field of what I call regenerative biology. That's getting us out of the couple decades of where we measured everything through neuroscience, and we're looking at the full intelligence of the system, which is really a great time to be doing stuff in wellness for any of you who are building things in the health and wellness space, because it allows us to take all the wisdom and pull it forward from the last 5,000 and even more years, and look at the current sciences and where we can go in a way that we haven't been able to do for a good 10 years. So that's exciting. So movement, and again, we can go a long ways into these. Most of you know exercise, movement. There's a lot of ways to achieve movement and enjoy movement. These are called fundamentals because you're going to do a lot more of them if you make them fun. So any of these practices, bring some joy, bring some enthusiasm, bring some vigor, bring some vitality to it, bring some energy to them. You're going to double back what you get out of them. So meditation, it's, there's great science in meditation now that most people know about, and if you don't, I don't know if it was the Dalai Lama or who said that if you don't have 15 minutes to meditate in the morning, then you should meditate for an hour. So we can go into any of these areas. Sleep, the sleep science that's come out in the last 5 years, from Matt Walker's work and a number of other researchers, is just, it's unbelievable. It's so clear. So if you're having challenges with sleep, the whole ecosystem of your day and how you're doing these other practices completely transform that. But it will completely transform how long you live, how healthy you live, whether how well you do these things. So continue to create, always be creative. You're the creative species. So whether you're making things, creating things, whatever that means to you, could be creating companies, could be creating art, could be creating, toys and games with your children, whatever that might mean. Continue to learn, always keep growing more, more synapse in your brain. Prosper actually is, yes, we want to make money, but prosper actually means to move forward with hope. And there's actually a science behind it, just like all of these other things. So to be in a trusting state of a rich, trusting state, and to be able to use that, to leverage that into prosperity, is a really critical thing to run your business, to run your life. Again, I apologize for going so fast on these. Celebration is just more enthusiastic way to say gratitude, because if we're really grateful, then we let's take it to the next level and let's really celebrate what we're grateful for. Life moves faster than we realize, and each moment is more precious than we give our attention to. So I invite you to make that shift. And then human connection. You're an amazing community here. Oliver and the team have put together, and you've come together. It's hard to get you in the seats because you're all connecting, but that's maybe the most valuable thing you do today. So that's great. And this is a quote by Nietzsche. I think you mentioned you liked this one earlier. That's there's more intelligence in the human body than all the philosophies of the world. And almost all the mental conditions that we look at today, we can solve, originate at the biological and other levels. So it's knowing the whole intelligence of the integrated system and up-resing that with practices and understanding, it is a game changer. I mean, it is really a game changer. So connections. We learned a lot about this when we lost them in COVID, right? So one great mentor of mine used to say, everything is about relationships, whether it's a relationship with yourself, with your cohorts in your work, with your purpose, with your friends, with your family. And so, if you don't have good energy, you got to be, you can't be fully present. You can't come from a place of love, and it's very hard to pursue your purpose. So I'm not going to go deep into music, but I just want to say all of those practices that I just showed you, we can dive into, elevate to the next level. I can up-res just about any area of your life by integrating music into that. Now that's a whole nother talk, and I'm happy to do it, but it's true. So one of the power tools or things that we stack into our work is music. And I've already well outspoken the little bit of time I was going to do and not given a lot of treasure to the time that I want to have Bruce. But please reach out to me and if you have any questions, if you need anything, and I'm going to shut up until you ask me something now. Thank you all.
Awesome. Can you relate to anything of what he just said? I mentioned the cancer part. In my own story, I didn't mention the burnout that led to the cancer part. And to me, there was a cautionary tale in a lot of what he's talking about. He mentioned 2 years past burnout. He's still going for 2 more years. When I had my hips replaced, I didn't mention the hip replacement. When I had my hips replaced, I'm a dancer, and I'm dancing again, like people cannot believe I'm the age I am or that I had both hips replaced. So I'm grateful every day that I went through hip replacement. But my point in saying this is that when the doctor checked out my bad hip joints, he said, the average person needing their hips replaced has lost 25-30% of their cartilage, which is why you got bone on bone. It's like agonizing, awful pain. He said, you have lost 70 to 80% of your cartilage. How are you dealing with the pain? I thought, damn, that HeartMath. Meaning I learned how to manage myself so well that I had adapted to extreme pain. I was literally lifting my leg into the car just to be able to sit in the car and drive every single time. Lift it in and lift it out because I could not lift it. There was so much pain. So it was extreme. But my point being, I had missed some of the warning signs, and so it had gotten more extreme. And I think, how many of you have ever felt like you've ever been at burnout? Let's ask that question first of all. Anybody feeling like they're at it now, or maybe they are, or now that you're listening to all this, maybe I'm a year past it, Yes, good to think about it. So jump off on that one, because to me that's a big deal relative to understanding where our energy is and maybe becoming more aware of, what did you learn from that whole process of going past the burnout? What's a key takeaway, I guess, is what I'm asking.
Well, other than like the dive into the processes, I learned that I had to up-level my awareness into my protocols and practices in which I just, which we shared, kind of touched upon. I think, the more you cultivate the more you can bring yourself to a place of center and coherence, the more you can start to hear the voice of your own intuition. And then it's a matter of whether you trust it, right? If you're out of, balance, we're always out of balance a little bit. We're moving back and forth. There's no strict balance, but it's very hard to know whether that voice that's talking to you is out of instinctual instinct, or whether it's out of intuition. So you have to really be able to kind of be in a coherent state. And so probably, it's clear I didn't listen, because my body was speaking to me, my spirit was speaking to me, my soul was speaking to me. I do a really simple practice as part of my morning. I do a whole morning routine with pranayama and meditation, and then day planning the day and, breaking it down kind of in the performance style. But it's, and after I set the number one thing to do and the number one thing to stop doing and the 3 things I have to get done to make it a great day, and the last question I ask myself is, what does love want for you today? And you can interpret love as spirit, soul, whatever that is. And sometimes since I've done all this preparation over the previous 30 minutes, and I'm in a state of reception, sometimes the answer is quite different than what I had planned for the day. And the difference now is I actually listen to that, and I might completely reschedule and rebalance things based upon the voice that's speaking from my soul in that moment, because I know that's the voice from my soul that's speaking to me.
I think we got to ask for some questions, but I have one more just to hear what people are thinking. Of the 10 fundamentals, what are the ones that are for you, which is everybody's gonna be different, but for you, what are the really non-negotiable ones? Because to me, this is a big deal. If COVID didn't show us anything other than connection, damn, is that an important one. I moved back to frickin' California from 3,300 miles away because it was so hard to make connections in frickin' Orlando, Florida. If you want to connect with Mickey and Minnie and Star Wars, yeah, no problem. But anyhow, what about for you?
Well, this idea for this workshop came out of something I used to do when I was working with Singularity University back 15 years ago. Started with them and saw that despite all these technologies, what people really needed was to understand the human condition and what drives it. And so for me, the tools that have been tried and true, I mean, there's the fundamental tools of staying alive, eating well, sleeping, But for me, I call them the 3 M's, not that means anything, but it's like they're not negotiable every day for me, and that's meditation, that's movement, and I have quite a, I run. You don't have to run Spartan races or do things like that like I do, but it's movement is critical. If I don't get to 10,000 steps before I go to sleep, I'm out walking in with the bunnies and the stars. Music, movement, and then music, and because music was my original source that helped me find calm in the midst of chaos and thrive in the face of challenge, and what I've spent 40 years bringing to the world for that purpose. So I do it because these things I could have never done my careers without these tools to bring me home, as you had said in the original song. So yeah.
Why don't we get a question or two? You raise your hand and maybe stand up so everybody can hear. Anybody have anything that's a burning question or even a simmering question?
Can you talk a little bit more about, you said prosper, you quickly went through that. I'm very curious about how you see that.
Yes, so money is an important form of energy. So I don't want to, do a spiritual bypass on that. But we know a lot of rich people. I have a lot of rich friends who are pretty unhappy and living from a place of fear. So prosper basically means to propel forward, to move forward with hope. And hope is a science that it combines a vision of where you're going, the agency, the belief, the trust that you can get there, and then multiple pathways that you can pivot to take you there so you don't get stuck. So this is also the pathway to prosperity. So, or building a business or any of these things is, it's so, when I talk about prosper, it's really not just what you get, it's what you become in the process.
I came late. I'm just looking at the website, and it says the integration of frequency medicine, of sound and light therapies. What is that? I'm sorry if you mentioned that before.
Yeah, so I didn't dive deep into the music and frequencies and light therapies. A lot of the stuff we're working on developing that have been around for well, I can give you the story of 250,000 years, but in evolutionary biology, but and how that came to be, the things that we're doing today came out of that period of when the cerebral cortex grew 300% because of the combination of those things you just mentioned, and storytelling. But right now there's a lot of the things that we're building. I like to stack, like in the peak performance or the flow states, we stack therapies. We stack neural triggers, is what we call it. And so in healing or, driving human potential or getting the system activated for optimal energy, I like to stack therapies. So it's we're building a lot of experiences at the intersection where we combine things like haptics, aromatherapy, music, sound therapy, light therapies, into a concentrated experience with an arc, that your body has to go through a kind of cathartic arc in a short amount of time, that we can, help people, get ready for taking on the world, recover, go into a surgery, recover from that, go into a game, recover from that. So that's a space where I'm doing a lot of kind of next level work and trying to bring the understanding of it at the biological level of how the cell, the mitochondria activate within the cell, and how that creates the communication channels to the brain and other parts of the body. So we can go a long ways down that path. There's a little bit in the book, Amplified, that I brought some copies, and I only had 4 copies with me at the home, so we'll do some sort of raffle at the end or whatever you want, but it's available, and I will do at some point, maybe here. I do a lot of talks that are specifically in that space.
I'm making a fitness app called Ficulator. Thank you for your session, and I want to ask. It was very impressive, but it wasn't that surprised in some way, because when you ask how many people have you faced the burnout, and I was there too, and from then I set up my protocol to what to do when I feel like burnout or depressed or very tired. So I go out for running and I listen to music or I get some sun. Yeah, I have my list. And do you have your own list, like your go-to solutions to overcome that kind of situation?
Yeah, I mean, we touched upon it a little bit when we were talking about what I call the music, meditation, and movement. So I know I need to move my system, that anything that's stress is taking place in the body. It first takes place in the energetic body, so if you're not aware of that subtle part of yourself, then it takes place in the physical body. A lot of times we don't become aware of that. It migrates its way up to the brain, and that's usually when we start to feel it, unless we have some physical ailment. So for me, it's those are key things. Nature is huge, being connected to the earth, being grounding. I'm blessed to live in Santa Monica, so I get to bike a lot and run barefoot in the water on the beach, and these are so I have a number of them. It's really okay. I really mainly tune into my spirit, and I go, what do you need now? I really trust in my inner guidance, at the time.
I want to answer that too. Nature. So when I was dealing with a staph infection in my blood, which required 6 hours a day of dripping a strong antibiotic into my arm, that's a lifestyle changer, attached to a rod, a stick. I'd go outside and just breathe and just not do a breath technique, just breathe nature, just feel the energy of nature. Not just it's a sunny day or it's a foggy morning or whatever, but literally feel this is a live environment, a field of all kinds of energy that is in my favor if I will just shut the fuck up long enough to feel it and appreciate it. So nature at a level of really deep gratitude for. We're inside, and it's still nature inside, or we wouldn't be breathing. But it's better outside. So get outside. So that's one thing. Second thing is dance. Now, everybody's not a dancer. I am. And I discovered that again when I got my hips replaced. And so once that was happening again, it's like, dude, if you have been in this shape, meaning sitting in front of a digital device for a certain period of time, change the shape. It's like get into move. Life is meant to flow. And if you're in a static posture in front of a screen of any size, too many hours, your flow is not there. It's not flowing. And so whether you love to dance or not, it isn't the point. I love it. But to me, it's like music can move us. And often it can move us to want to move and get out of that rigid posture, which is rigid thinking usually, and rigid emotional responses usually. And the rigidity is not just about the spine and the rest of the structure. It's about where our mind is at, where our emotional flow is at. So dance, and if you're squirming, even that I mentioned the word dance, you probably ought to do it.
Yeah, dance. During COVID, I had clients across the world who were having stress and they couldn't go to the gym or go to yoga classes. And I said, do you like to dance? I said, do a one song dance before lunch every day, and it'll change your neurochemical structure for the rest of the day.
Could you go into more specifics about what you've done with music and sound in this capacity? Just were you composing or working with frequencies, or?
Yeah. Again, I know we want to do a deep dive into the music, and we can do that. But so I had about I still do. I guess if the music you listened to as you were coming in was from the last 2 tribute albums to my work of entertainment impact work in the world. With artists. So I produced many artists as a composer, producer, and did many films and soundtracks to leverage the power of film through media, the power of music and storytelling, to shift people's consciousness at scale. So that was really, those were my tools, and also now integrating it into health and technology systems to help people at a more individual level. So. I won't go into each of those, but it's a long 40-year path. So yeah.
Hi, thank you for the talk and for the interview. I loved everything you said. I'm an aromatherapist focusing on longevity and resilience, and I'm very aligned with what you say about that it's much more about the health span or aligning health and lifespan, and not so much about becoming 150 years old or whatever. But as you know, there are so many very strict protocols to stay healthy in terms of movement, breath, nutrition. And I was just wondering what your opinion is on all of these very strict protocols, or if you think more everybody has to find their own, go by research and medicine, or go by intuition. I'm very curious. What's your point of view there?
I'll give a quick answer as best I can, and then I'm sure Bruce has a few things to add, and then I think then we got to wrap up, right? So it's so I think everybody should. They're like the ones that I laid out for you are pretty across the peak performance and longevity space are pretty. They're pretty mapped, well known, and I think that what I would invite you to do is to remove the word strict from it, because there are natural states of behavior when we were not trained to behave differently. So these are very things we've done for thousands of years. And as we enter a more intensive kind of time, there are things we can return to that help us return to ourselves and our power. So I try not to think that, yes, it takes discipline and consistency and like anything that you want to build. So if that sounds strict or hard, I mean, it's not going to just come to you in a biohack. But at the same time, I would invite you to like find the things that, like, if you took that list, what are the 3 that are a game changer for you? Anybody in this room, if I went back to those 10 things, you would find 3 that these are if I do these 3 things, I know I'm going to have a good day, And try that, and try it for 30 days. Shift to something else if that's not doing it. Don't feel like you have to follow somebody else's map, but use those resources as a starting point is what I would recommend.
Ditto. And specifically, the word bioindividuality is so true, meaning when I observe this living system, meaning me, how all the ways I have changed over the years, I had scoliosis also, and still do, but my dancing body doesn't care. In fact, it makes me want to twist more to kind of get loose from the structure that's it's a little bit wonky. So the bioindividuality is a really, really, really important thing. And as I've studied, I've worked in healthcare systems, consulted to NHS in the UK, consulted to Mayo, Kaiser, et cetera, for years. The reality that we are all constantly alive and changing, and so what our body needs is constantly changing based on sleep, based on phase of life we're in, based on hormonal changes, based on the phase of life. There's so many factors that if we're too stuck on your term strict protocol, to our detriment, in my opinion. So while a doctor or anybody clinical can have a suggestion of what they have found to be true for other people, that doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work just like that for you. That's true of everything. So some people are incredibly sensitive to certain nutrients or certain pharmaceuticals, and it has an amazingly positive effect on them. Other people, it doesn't. So the more we can tune in, this is the intelligence of the body, and realize we have a super, super intelligent system that is giving us input, but if we're too stressed out or at the point of burnout, we can't hear it. We can't hear the signals we're getting already in most cases. So that's another way to answer that, is the bioindividuality, and we are all unique. And so you've got to find what's really true for you, and that's a daily process. What do I need today? It may be different than yesterday. I think we're
gonna. I think we're gonna wrap up, and if there's any, I'm sure there's some unanswered questions, so feel free to speak to Bruce and I. I mean, this man's a wealth of knowledge, and talent. And come up to me or email me if you didn't get, there's something you want to ask about more at a later date. And let's thank you so much. And what's most important to me is that you leave this room today with something that's going to help you move through tomorrow. So if you didn't get that, please come up and I hope you get that. And I believe we're going to do another workshop to go deeper into this work here at the KIN at some point in the near future. So watch for that.